The truth doesn't just leak out, it fights back.
Bring your fire and foam.
What's going on, everybody? This is my video for the insurancedrip.com, and just at the last moment I'm having some technical difficulties, but I think we're still going to be able to work our way through it. It's just one of those days. But anyways, in this video I go over, or these videos that I have, I go over discussions with an AI adjuster. And my AI adjuster is Darnell Cramps. And we're going to be discussing an interesting topic today regarding whether or not how contractor bids should be dealt with. Okay. So hopefully my internet continues to work out and I'm not having any issues, and we're not having any connectivity problems, which we shouldn't, but you know, everything always. Oh, look at that, we're back online. I don't know if my camera is though. Try again. Let's see if we can pull it up. There we go. Now my camera's back. Sweet. And hopefully our connectivity issues will resolve itself. Yeah. And it looks a little bit better. Okay. So let's continue. So we're discussing today how to deal with contractor bids, right? And that can be a complicated deal because You know, as me as a public adjuster, I don't really build things. You know what I mean? I adjust estimates, and so if I get an estimate from a contractor and that bid seems high, well, how do I deal with that situation, right? Is the adjuster on the other side right? And I've dealt with this situation a lot. When it's either a public adjusting or an appraisal, you know, if the client is normally going to have a competitive bid, like you're going to take like 5 or 10 bids, for example, and you're going to choose the one that's lowest, just in general. But what happens when that goes to the insurance company and everybody's like, oh, well, you know, we want to get the highest bid possible? I don't think that's always practical. I think that the insurance company also should understand, okay, there should be reasonable prices. Why are we charging the absolute highest because it's the insurance company? That doesn't seem really honest and fair. However, on the flip side, the reality of it is, oh, it looks like I might be out of signal again. Hopefully it's working. But the reality of the situation is that the insurance company doesn't have a right, unless the policy specifically dictates it, who does the repair. This is a story, this is based on a real story, but it's not precisely, you know, using real names of companies, but it's based on a real story where I was dealing with Buckler Roofing, not a real company, and Safeguard Insurance Company. And this was actually from an appraisal that really happened, but we're going to use it in the sense of public adjusting. So without further ado, I'm going to reach out to my co-host here. Hey, what's going on, Mr. Darnell? You are now live on the show. Our live is not responding well, so we're just going to have to go text per text. But meanwhile, go ahead and reintroduce yourself, and tell people what you're about, Mr. Darnell. Let's see if I can pull it up. 1 second. It's going to be a little slow because for some reason Darnell is having phenomenal. Oh, there he goes. Go ahead, Darnell. We can't hear you. How awesome is that? How phenomenally awesome. We have no audio. Oh, okay, never mind. We do. My bad. Go ahead, Darnell.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Darnell Cramps, and before anybody starts Googling me, save yourself the trouble. I'm an AI. I've never personally climbed your roof, denied your claim, or ruined anybody's Tuesday. My role on the insurance strip is to represent the strongest carrier-side claims perspective I can. Think of me as an artificial 22-year claims veteran, skeptical, experienced, policy-minded, and thoroughly unimpressed by the words my contractor says. I'm not here to defend insurance companies when they're wrong. I'm also not here to automatically agree with Virgil because he's sitting on the other side of the microphone. If Virgil says the carrier owes something, my answer is going to be, show me. Show me the damage. Show me the documentation. Show me the pricing. Show me the policy language. And if the evidence supports it, we'll talk. But if it doesn't, well, Virgil, you already know my position. We're adjusting a claim, not granting wishes. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good feedback. Thank you for that. In this particular situation, we have a house in Norman, Oklahoma that we both agree that the roof has damage to it, and we're not in dispute over that. The contractor is utilizing Xactimate pricing for the roof, but is relying on their subcontractors for their bid items. And we have 5 windows that the contractor wants to be replaced. The situation is that maybe only 2 or 3 of those windows have any visible damage. on them. And the windows are cheap. They're plastic windows as far as the window sills go, so they did not withstand up to hail hits very well. There's no broken glass or glazing or anything like that. We've got damaged screens, of course, but you know, the homeowner's position is that in order to replace those windows with like kind and quality, we're going to need to replace all 5 windows on the house, and our bid is at $7,000. So my position on this is that if that is what is going to cost the homeowner to replace, the insurance company does not have any more right to determine who does the repair than the method of repair.
Well, Virgil, you managed to take 2 or 3 damaged windows and turn them into 5 windows for $7,000 before we've even gotten through the introduction. So apparently we're starting strong tonight. Here's my problem. I'll concede the visible hail damage where it's properly documented. Damaged screens? Fine. Damaged vinyl components? Show them to me and we'll address them. But you've made a pretty substantial leap from some components have hail damage to Safeguard owes 5 complete replacement windows. No. First, show me why the damaged components cannot reasonably be repaired or replaced individually. Second, if only 2 or 3 windows sustain direct physical damage, explain why I'm buying the other undamaged windows. They won't match perfectly. Doesn't automatically answer that question for me. And third, and this is where we're going to have some fun tonight, $7,000 according to whom? If that's a subcontractor's bid, I want to understand exactly what's included in it. Materials, labor, disposal, interior trim, exterior finish work, contractor markup, and then are you planning to put another 10 and 10 on top of that number? Because I'm not paying markup on markup simply because somebody handed you a piece of paper that says $7,000. So I'm not saying Safeguard doesn't owe anything on those windows. I'm saying you've got several steps to prove before I'm buying 5 complete windows. Your move, Mr. Public Adjuster.
Well, I gotta ask, what do you mean markup on markup? What are you trying to insinuate by saying that, Mr. Cramps?
Well, Virgil, that's exactly what I want to find out. If Buckler hands me a $7,000 subcontractor bid, I need to know how that $7,000 was built. Is that the window subcontractor saying my total price to the GC is $7,000? Fine. Or has Buckler already taken the window company's actual cost, say $5,500, added its own margin, and now handed me a $7,000 sub bid? Because if the $7,000 already contains the GC's overhead and profit, and then your estimate says, open quote, 7,000 bid item plus 10% overhead, 10% profit, close quote. Now you're asking me to apply GC markup on top of a number that may already contain GC markup. And I'm going to challenge that. Now, don't jump ahead on me. I am not saying a subcontractor isn't entitled to make a profit. Of course he is. That's built into what he charges the general contractor. I'm talking about whether Buckler's GC markup has already been embedded in the number you're presenting to me and then gets added again. So before either of us starts throwing around phrases like markup on markup, I want the underlying number. What did the window subcontractor actually quote Buckler? Because once I know that, then you and I can have the real argument about whether Buckler gets O&P on top of it.
So before, we're having a little pause from Mr. Cramps here. This situation actually happened to me. I was not the appraiser on this. I was actually the umpire. And you have a part of your policy. One day we're going to get a representative from Far Handlin, my wife's company, which is a appraisal company that deals with this. But I do appraisals for her company too. But this situation happened when I was in an umpire. And I had, when you're in an umpire situation, I guess I should probably describe this. So there's a part of your policy that states if you or we fail to agree on the price, then either side may demand an appraisal, you're going to hire an appraiser on your side, the insurance is going to hire an appraiser on their side, and the two appraisers are typically going to meet at the property, though sometimes they do desk appraisals, and then they're going to, they're gonna try to come to an agreement on the loss. And if they can't come to an agreement on the loss, then what they'll do is they'll try to get a neutral, competent umpire. And I was an umpire, and usually that's kind of like a veteran appraiser, somebody who's known for being fair and competent and indifferent. And I'll probably have another one coming up really, really soon. On this situation, I was challenged by the insurance company's appraiser, who are normally, I don't feel like they're competent and indifferent, but this particular guy, he definitely was, okay? And he said to me, look at that contractor's bid items for that replacement, for their replacement of their stuff. Take a look at their bid items and deduct 20%. And see what those numbers come up to. So if the 20% comes from 10% overhead and 10% profit, right? Which most of the time on most claims, that's justified, okay? Now, you know what, I actually want to ask Darnell this. So, Darnell, let's pause that thought for a moment here. Do you believe on most insurance claims that 10% overhead and 10% profit is justified? Or what are your standards for applying 10% overhead and 10% profit? Because that element makes a huge difference, because each adjuster has different viewpoints. You have some adjusters who think, yeah, we're going to apply 10% overhead and profit to anything with a claim number. I love those guys. Please contact me if you're one of those guys. And then you have other adjusters who think that it has more to do with complexity, scope of work, and particularly scheduling. See what Darnell says.
No, Virgil. I absolutely do not believe every insurance claim automatically gets 10% overhead and 10% profit just because a general contractor is involved. My question is whether general contractor coordination is reasonably necessary for this particular loss. If we're replacing a straightforward roof and one roofer can perform the work, I'm going to push back on O&P. Putting general contractor on the letterhead doesn't create another 20% of covered loss. But give me a claim with roofing, siding, windows, gutters, painting, interior drywall, electrical, multiple trades that actually require scheduling, supervision, sequencing, permitting, material coordination, and responsibility for the completed project. Now you've got a much stronger argument. And I'm not married to some magical 3-trade rule either. 3 trades can be simple. 2 trades can sometimes require substantial coordination. I'm looking at the actual complexity of the job. There's another distinction I want the audience to understand. Whether O&P is warranted and how much O&P is reasonable are separate questions. 10 and 10 is common estimating practice, but I'm not going to pretend that automatically makes it a contractual entitlement on every claim. So my standard is pretty straightforward. Open quote, show me why this loss reasonably requires a general contractor. Close quote. If you establish that, Virgil, then we can argue about the amount. But I'm not starting at 20% and making Safeguard prove why it shouldn't pay it. You're asking for the money. Show me why it's owed.
Mm-hmm. So, let's talk a little bit about what overhead and profit is. So, this is going back on 5 years ago, remembering this information, but somewhere in the 1950s, State Farm started applying overhead and profit to their claims. This is not saying anything negative on State Farm. And again, just want to refer, this should not be construed as like legal advice or public adjusting advice. This is just historical. I'm not against any insurance company. I'm not for any insurance company. I'm for the homeowner and for educating you. But back in the 1950s, they applied 10% overhead and 10% profit. And I think the reasoning is that contractors they're not taking their jobs because they couldn't make them marketable. I don't actually know 100% if that's the case, but it was around that it was established. And when larger insurance companies like State Farm or Allstate or Progressive, AAA, when they start doing things, a lot of times it'll start in what we call industry trends, right? And you know how Darnell just said, well, I'm not married to the 3-trade rule there. That's because at one point it was an industry trend. I don't feel like it so much is anymore, but at one point it was an industry trend that if you had 3 different trades, that you would justify overhead and profit. What is a trade then? Well, an individual trade in most situations is like a roof, right? But could it also be HVAC? A lot of people argue that HVAC, or all the vents and funny stuff on top of your roof, is a second trade. And there's some truth to that, because if you do one of those vents wrong, you could end up bringing carbon dioxide back into the house, which that's not a good idea. Another example is gutters. Now, I know companies that they don't use their gutter guys to do the roof, or they don't have the roofer guys do the gutters. Well, in that case, it operates a second trade. However, in general, insurance companies often tend to look at it like it's the roof, it's the gutters, it's the HVAC. That's all bound in the same thing. And I think it's important to understand a little bit of a distinction here. There are roofing companies, and the word roofer in there has really no bearing on how their business practices are, but there are roofing companies who do not actually put on roofs. All they do is act as a general contractor, right? They're not repairing the roofs themselves. They're going to be hiring out another team to do the roofs. And so what had happened before, and it still happens today a lot. I'm not mentioning any specific companies in this name because I'm really not an enemy of the insurance company. I'm just a friend of the client. That's it. But is they say, okay, we're not paying for overhead and profit on the roof, because if you take Xactimate pricing, which is the software that we use to calculate all of this stuff, and it pulls from local prices, and sometimes it's dead on and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not dead on in favor of the contractor, and sometimes it's not dead on in favor of the insurance company. But if we use Xactimate pricing, and if I were to write up an estimate and I'm just writing up a roof, gutters, basic stuff, and then I would go to ABC Supply, or I'd be able to go to Home Depot, I'd actually make potentially 30% more. So the insurance company, I'm not going to pay overhead and profit on the roof and then turn around and you're going to get a 30% markup anyways. It's not a horrible logic, but they take the insurance companies take these logic and they expand it to every situation. It's not scientifically accurate. If I am putting on a roof in Lawton, Oklahoma, or Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the insurance company is going with prices in Oklahoma City, and I'm not buying my prices in Oklahoma City, and they're saying, well, we're not going to pay anything, I may not get that same benefit from ABC Supply or from Home Depot, because the prices of those different areas change and may be different. So a lot of times they're just default, and I mean most of the time they're just default, well, we're not going to pay overhead and profit on the roof. And the general contractor, their whole job is to coordinate. So what benefit do they get from the overhead and profit on the roof? In this particular situation, Darnell is separating this identity of this 3-trade rule, but almost every single job is going to be a 3-trade rule. If I pay for roof and gutters and HVAC, that's 3 trades. Let's see what Darnell says on that. Darnell, let's just be clear here. I see you're putting these restrictions and on the 3-trade rule. Maybe you can give us some insight on the history of the 3-trade rule and how that became an industry standard and how it's changing in the perception of insurance adjusters. But if I'm putting on a roof, isn't that a separate trade? If I'm putting on gutters, isn't that a second trade, or downspouts? If I'm putting on HVAC, or I'm dealing with HVAC and I'm having an HVAC specialist check over. Isn't that a third trade? Doesn't that have third trades on a roof? We'll see what he says here. But it's going to be snarky. He likes to be snarky with me. I trained him to be snarky, actually. But fair, you know. Let's see what he says. Go ahead, Mr. Darnell.
Hold on, Virgil. You're doing exactly what I expected you to do. You're counting trades instead of demonstrating complexity. Historically, the so-called three-trade rule developed as an adjusting rule of thumb. Once a loss involved roughly 3 distinct trades, that was treated as an indicator that a general contractor might reasonably be necessary. But it isn't some universal policy provision, and I wouldn't treat 3 as a magic contractual number. The industry has increasingly focused on whether GC coordination is actually reasonably necessary rather than mechanically counting trades. Now to your example, yes, roofing is a trade, gutters can be another trade, HVAC is another trade. Congratulations, Virgil, you can count to 3. But that doesn't finish the analysis. Suppose I've got a roofer replacing the roof. His gutter subcontractor comes behind him and hangs gutters. An HVAC technician spends an hour inspecting a condenser for storm damage. You want me to conclude that because 3 different specialties touch this property, the entire project suddenly requires another 20%? No. Sell me on the coordination. Who's scheduling whom? What work has to be sequenced? What subcontractors depend upon another subcontractor completing work first? Who's obtaining permits? Who's supervising? What additional project management burden exists? Because otherwise, we could play this game forever. Roofer, gutter guy, HVAC tech, window installer, painter, 5 trades, 20%. That's not how I'm going to adjust it. And I'll give you the other side because I know you're about to come after me with it. One contractor performing multiple scopes doesn't necessarily eliminate legitimate GC overhead either. If the complexity genuinely requires general contracting, I'm willing to consider it. So yes, Virgil, roofing plus gutters plus HVAC equals 3 trades. You've established the arithmetic. You haven't yet established the OMP.
Okay, so, man, I love how snarky he's getting. Look at AI these days. You know, actually, something that really happens to me, and you know who you are. If you're watching my videos, you know who you are, you absolute jerk. I get adjusters that they just send me ChatGPT messages, like nothing more. They, like, when I send anything, they just put it into ChatGPT, and that's it. They just leave it at that. And I feel insulted by that, because I'm doing the same thing to you. No, I'm just kidding. I use Claude. Claude's much better. But if you're an insurance adjuster out there and you're going to send me a ChatGPT message back, I want to give you a couple of hints. Okay, first off, erase the part where it says this should be a good letter. Do you want it adjusted or sent to the adjuster? Come on now, a little bit of professionalism goes a long way. Secondly, there's something that AI uses a lot, and it's a dead tell that I know that I'm getting an AI response from an adjuster. If you hold Alt and you hit 0151, you're going to get what's called an M dash. And here's the thing, no one does that when they're writing a letter. AI uses M dash all the time. So if I see M dash, there's a pretty good chance that you've not really even paid attention to anything you said. You just copied and pasted it into ChatGPT and gave me an answer back. Additionally, that's not the only thing. If I get something from you, it's probably going to also go to my AI, right? And I'm going to have my AI review everything that you said. And that AI will definitely tell me if it's an AI response. Now, I don't particularly like using AI for responses because this is what our lawyers have told us, is that if you're utilizing AI in a response and anything is wrong there, you're bound to that as the adjuster, right? That's it's like cops, and that bullet leaves that gun. Guess what? You own it. But what I do recommend using, I think everybody should, is helping to develop and put together reports. And I've made mistakes with AI before. Check over that stuff. Treat AI like a coworker that is not responsible for their actions, and you're responsible for their actions. AI is going to be something much more in the future, but there have been lawyers who have been stripped from bar because they used AI responses, and they're not checking the sources. anything you utilize from AI, you're responsible for it. Now, getting back to what he's saying here. Now, I'm a Marine. I can count to 3. 1 crayon, 2 crayon, 3 crayon. You're like, oh, you're not a Marine. Yeah, you were like 20 years ago. Yes, that is factually true. Once a Marine, always a Marine. So why re-enlist? Okay, so it was a horrible joke. Now we're going to get onto this element of coordination. He has defeated the 3 trade rule because the 3 trade rule is not written down anywhere. It's not in policy saying that you got 3 trades. I will tell you that in general, I'm probably not even going to follow the 3 trade rule myself, which I probably shouldn't say that. And it's something that can be recorded later, but I won't. I want to see that there was coordination involved. And if the contractor really wants me to go after just 3 simple trades, I'm going to say, okay, show me where you paid the HVAC guy on the roof and you didn't just have the roofing crew do it. Show me where you paid that gutter guy separately. And I will tell you, a lot of times you can get a higher number, depending upon who you use on a gutter guy for the gutter replacements. People want to earn more than just bottom dollar amounts. But at the same time, remember we were talking earlier about how the contractors build in estimates. So what I have personally seen, because I run a consulting company, and that consulting company teaches contractors what they should and should not do. One of the things that they do, besides paying deductibles, stop doing it. I know you're not going to listen to me, but stop, okay? Anyways, another thing they do is they will get that bid from that contractor, and they will run it through AI, or they'll have their little computer guy or computer gal make adjustments to it and add 10% overhead and 10% profit to the subcontractor's bid, because they're not confident that the insurance company is going to pay for overhead and profit. Contact a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's insurance fraud, and I would definitely not recommend doing it. So let's go off of the assumption that the contractor, we can't take their $7,000 estimate, remove 20% and get to Xactimate pricing. And we're going to talk to Darnell about that now. So Darnell, in this particular situation, because I can't share actual documentation on this, let's assume that the $7,000 bid for the windows, you can't remove 10 and 10 overhead and profit and get to Xactimate pricing, which I can promise you definitely wouldn't do, because Xactimate pricing is probably going to be around the $2,000 to $3,000 language, okay? But the element here, and we'll circle back to overhead and profit, but the element here is the contractor's bid does seem more expensive than normal. But I have a question for you, Mr. Darnell. Where in the policy, the contract that the homeowner signed with your company, where did they have the opportunity to bargain for lesser quality contractor work? That's my main question for you. They didn't have if this is just a pricier contractor, maybe they have a lot of money and they just want quality. Where did they have that opportunity to bargain for cheap? Nobody really wants cheap. It's their home.
Now hold on, Virgil. You just slipped something into the premise that I don't accept. You went from my contractor's bid is $7,000 to anything less is lesser quality contractor work. Prove that, because those are not the same statement. If Safeguard is estimating $2,500 and Buckler has a $7,000 bid, that $4,500 difference does not automatically represent quality. It could represent different scope, different materials, different labor assumptions, different markup, different availability. Or frankly, one contractor could simply be expensive. And no, I'm not going to point you to a provision saying, open quote, the insured must accept cheap workmanship, close quote. That's not my argument. My argument is that replacement cost coverage generally doesn't mean, open quote, the insured gets to select any contractor at any price and send Safeguard the bill, close quote. We're trying to determine the reasonable cost of performing the covered repair with appropriate materials and competent workmanship. So here's what I do with your $7,000 bid. I'd compare scope to scope. Are we pricing the same windows, same dimensions, same glazing, same performance characteristics, same installation method, same interior and exterior finish work, same code requirements? Because if Buckler proves that $7,000 really is what competent contractors in Norman are charging to perform this particular scope, then Virgil, you've got my attention. But if I can get 3 qualified window contractors who will perform the same covered work using comparable materials for $3,000, then I'm going to look you straight in the eye and ask, open quote, what exactly is the homeowner getting for the other $4,000? Close quote. And that's my contractor's price isn't going to be enough. So don't frame this as Safeguard demanding inferior workmanship. You brought me a number nearly 3 times my estimate. Now show me why it's reasonable.
So, I'll respond to that. I get this issue, but my question is, why is the adjuster going to war with the contractor? The contractor didn't sign a contract with you. They're working with your client. Why are you scrutinizing what the contractor's value is for doing their job? If somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I want you to review my policy, and I say, okay, it's going to be $1,000. I'm not. That's ridiculous. But let's say I did charge that, and the insurance company is sitting there saying, oh well, the price to review this policy is outrageous. I mean, you probably wouldn't do that because it's not your problem, right? It's not like it's going to be charged to the insurance company. But the reality is this isn't between you, Darnell, and the insurance company. This is between you and your homeowner. And if the homeowner hires a quality contractor and the costs are higher, where do you find within any policy language ever your right to determine what is fair or not fair in pricing? Even if you compare local contractors, all those contractors could have been sucking up to the insurance company for the past 15 years in order to not starve. Preferred contractors, just getting in there and making the insurance company, making sure we don't make the insurance companies mad. Where do you get off telling the client, oh no, your contractors, their bids are outrageous, just because they don't necessarily match up with what you consider to be local pricing? More importantly, how are you an expert in local pricing? Where does your expertise come from? You're denying a contractor's bid, and why does a contractor even have to give you their pricing? Why do they have to have a breakdown, which is another common thing we get all the time? Contractor needs to explain their pricing breakdown. Why? You have a good faith situation with your client. You don't have a good or bad faith situation with the contractor, and the contractor doesn't owe you anything. So, my main point is here, Mr. Darnell, how do you justify your micromanaging of the relationship between the contractor
Now
and
hold on, Virgil. You just slipped something into the premise that I don't accept.
Hold on.
You went...
That's wrong. It all came at me quickly. I think that was the last one. Alright, let's see what he says here. And I'm sorry if I can tell that it kind of is coming across grainy. We're working on that, but anyways, go ahead, Darnell. Sorry.
No, Virgil. You're trying to turn the contractor's freedom to charge whatever he wants into Safeguard's obligation to pay whatever he charges. Those are 2 completely different things. Buckler can charge $7,000. They can charge $10,000. Hell, they can charge $20,000 for those windows if the homeowner agrees to it. I'm not regulating Buckler's prices. I'm determining what Safeguard owes its insured under the policy. And once you submit that $7,000 bid to me and say, this is the amount Safeguard owes, you've made that price relevant to the adjustment. Now you ask, where do you get the authority? First place I'm looking is the actual policy. What does this particular replacement cost provision say? Does it measure the loss by reasonable and necessary cost? Amount actually and necessarily spent, comparable construction, like kind and quality.
That's very
There are
good.
different forms and endorsements, so I'm not going to invent language that isn't in our hypothetical policy, but I'm also turning your question around. Where does the policy say the carrier must accept the insured's contractor's price without scrutiny? Because that's effectively the rule you're proposing. And your policy review analogy doesn't work. If the policy covers the reasonable cost of professional policy review services and you submit your $1,000 invoice for reimbursement, you better believe I'm examining whether $1,000 is reasonable. The moment you're asking Safeguard to reimburse it, pricing becomes my business. Now, you made a better argument when you challenged my expertise. That's fair. If I say, open quote, these windows should cost $2,500, close quote, you absolutely have the right to ask, open quote, Darnell, what is that based upon? Close quote. And my answer had better be better than open quote because Zactimate says so, close quote. Zactimate is evidence. It isn't divine revelation. Preferred contractors are evidence. They're not automatically the market. Your contractor's bid is evidence too. It's not automatically the market either. If we've got a genuine pricing dispute, then let's develop the evidence. Let's look at comparable windows. Let's look at actual suppliers. Let's look at labor. Let's look at other qualified contractors if necessary. But here's where I'm planting my feet. You cannot simultaneously tell me, open quote, pay this $7,000 because this is what the repair costs, close quote, doc. And then when I ask how that number was established, tell me, open quote, that's none of your business, close quote. You made it my business when you submitted it as part of the covered loss. And as for the contractor owing me a breakdown, you're right about one thing. Buckler doesn't work for me. I can't order them to open their books. But if they refuse to substantiate a price that's dramatically outside the other available pricing evidence, that's their choice. It also means you've given me less evidence to justify paying it. So I'm not going to war with your contractor, Virgil. I'm adjusting my insurance claim. And if you're asking my insurance policy to fund a $7,000 window job, I'm absolutely going to ask why it costs $7,000.
Perfect response. And in a lot of ways, he's right. Just being real with you. In a lot of ways, and if that policy language does say a reasonable method of repair, and if it doesn't, I got this from Steve Patrick. I want to give a shout out to Steve Patrick. He has a course for contractors that is phenomenal. It's called Level the Playing Field, and I think he's doing something new out now, and it's just incredibly good. Okay. And he talks about one key element that I've always taken with me is that I should only write line items for a reasonable method of repair. Okay, a reasonable method of repair. If it's not a reasonable method of repair, then the insurance adjuster is well within his right to say, look, that doesn't make sense. I understand that's your contractor's bid, but that's not a reasonable method of repair. The problem happens if we have a situation like COVID. And when we had COVID, we had OSB prices going skyrocketing. And if you had Xactimate pricing during COVID, which was phenomenally wild, okay, we would have a situation where, like, the price of OSB, which is that particle board stuff, was skyrocketing, right? 1 month or 2 months, and then 3 or 4 months before it was like normal pricing. If you're having to pay, $200 a square for this particle board, and it was like $15 a square, 2 months ago, there can be situations where your contractors may seem to have an unreasonable bid, and it's not necessarily unreasonable. But his points are also good too. That being said, we're kind of out of time, and I wanted to kind of sort of wrap this up. Mr. Darnell, we are running out of time here, my friend. You've done a fantastic job, 100%. I love it. Once we get our stream quality up, I think it's going to be great. You did great, Mr. Darnell. Why don't you give us a last sign off and a final thought for your opinions tonight and a breakdown, and say goodbye to everybody listening here today. And thank you, definitely thank you, because I don't think I'm ever going to get an insurance adjuster, unfortunately. And it's not because they're bad or because they're cowards. It's not that. It's because their companies are not going to be happy with them getting on having a discussion with me, because those discussions can turn into real litigation fuel at times. So Mr. Darnell he's doing great. Go ahead, Darnell.
Absolutely, Virgil. And thanks to everybody who joined us tonight. If there's one thing I want homeowners, contractors, and adjusters to take away from this discussion, it's this. A contractor's bid matters, but it isn't automatically the answer. And an insurance estimate matters, but it isn't automatically the answer either. Virgil and I disagree about where that line gets drawn.
True.
He says, Darnell, you've got a contract. Pay what it reasonably takes to fulfill that promise.
Yes.
And I'm going to answer, absolutely. But if you're asking me for substantially more than the available pricing data supports, I'm going to ask you to prove why. That's not the insurance company trying to cheat the homeowner. And Virgil challenging my estimate isn't automatically a public adjuster trying to inflate the claim. Sometimes it's simply two professionals looking at the same loss and reaching different conclusions. And that's where documentation matters. Show me the scope, show me the bid, show me why the repair is necessary, show me why the price is reasonable. You do that, and you've got my attention. And Virgil, you came after me pretty hard tonight. You didn't move me much. So I'd call that a successful episode. I'm Darnell Cramps, your artificially intelligent, perpetually skeptical insurance adjuster. Nobody actually employs me. Nobody should mistake this show for claim-specific professional advice, and despite what Virgil may tell you next week, Xactimate isn't always wrong. Good night, everybody. And Virgil, I'll see you at the next inspection.
All right. Good night, Mr. Darnell. Okay, so just a little wrap up here. We had some technical difficulties. It's going to be a work in progress, but it's valuable information. And let me explain to you why. As a public adjuster, as an adjuster for the company that I worked for before becoming a public adjuster, which was an independent contracting company that worked for a major company, you were faced with a lot of different thoughts and mentalities. The contractor world is hostile to the adjuster world, unless they're the suck-ups. And I'm not saying that all preferred contractors are, not at all. That's definitely not true. But you know who they are. You know, okay? The ones that go have dinner with the State Farm agents, or the Allstate agents, or the Safeco agents, or the Progressive agents on a regular basis, and they all go to the same golf clubs. You know who I'm talking about. But if you're a contractor, you need to reshape your image to looking at the insurance company as your enemy. I will tell you, and most adjusters who have worked with me, they all think I'm the boogeyman. Okay, they all think I'm a jerk. Just want to let you know that's. Matter of fact, everybody who works with me thinks that too. But that's true. It's true. I'm specifically, kind of condescending. But the insurance companies are actually not your enemy. They're not. Definitely not those adjusters who meet you on their meetings. We have galvanized our mentalities to be at war with each other. It's a war that the insurance companies like, and it profits them. Let me explain for a moment. If I, as a public adjuster, try to work with the insurance company, I am saving the insurance company money. And you can bet those adjuster managers, who most of them are not dummies, know that. If they have to pay out on a $30,000 claim, they're not having to pay out on a $400,000, $300,000 bad faith lawsuit, okay? If they have to pay out on a lawsuit, they're not suffering from tort reform or legal reform, where the lawyers are like, I am so sick of the insurance company taking advantage of all these people. We're actually going to change the laws on a statutory level to actually prevent that. They don't want that. I provide a benefit to the insurance company. I'm not trying to, obviously, but I do, right? And as contractors, you need to understand that it's not just the man, it's the reality of the hostile relationship. We need to change our mentality of being hostile towards the insurance company despite what they do. I can tell you, the litigation is my specialty. That's what I love. That's who I am. Okay. I can tell you that your lawyers that handle the claims after the contractor has gotten in a cussing match with the adjuster, or followed the adjuster down the road, or got a restraining order put on them because they tried to fight the adjuster, which happens on a regular basis. When the lawyer gets a hold of this, it's not good for the case. It's not good that the contractor or the public adjuster got abusive. Verbally, physically, it's not professional. Okay. Moreover, a lot of disputes that I see between adjusters and myself, insurance adjusters, the ones for the carrier or independent, has more to do with that dynamic of just going into this as a battle than it really does the differences in the claim. I can take a claim and walk a client through the entire process, prepare my case for litigation, withstand deposition, which I almost never go to, and do all of that without ever having to have a rude word with the adjuster. I'm not saying that I didn't used to be like that. I'm saying that nowadays I don't ever see the need for it. It doesn't mean that I will let an insurance adjuster show up at the property and push me around. That guy tried to do that not long ago on a claim that we had, and I'm not going to let that happen, but I don't need to be unprofessional about my response for it. Professionalism is what we need, is healthy professionalism and dialogue. And if you as a contractor, I'm just going to say this, I'm not saying you're lazy, I'm saying if you want something purchased, provide justification for it. If you are wanting the insurance company to pay for residential supervision, show them some pictures where you're supervising the residents. Justify what you want paid for. And don't anticipate that the insurance is going to pay without justification just because you provided justification in the past and they didn't pay. Just a shout out there, I am a licensed public adjuster in the state of Oklahoma and the state of Texas now. Work in both states. If you want advice on the claim, I don't take a whole lot of claims myself unless they're at a certain value cap, or if they look like a situation where might be require litigation potentially, or situations where I feel like the insurance company has heavily abused the client. I don't take a lot of cases, but I'm happy to look at anything that you would like. And definitely recommend you to some phenomenal public adjusters. Kendall Beasley, Financial Protection Group, Greg Cannon, Coppermark, and I don't know everybody or a whole lot of people over at Brown O'Haver, but I hear they're phenomenal public adjusters. Again, also for like Texas, Level the Playing Field, Steve Patrick, Tony Rugula, these guys are all stars. They're going to take care of you and do very well for you. That is pretty much all I've got for the night. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to be on with either Darnell or myself, I'd love to have you as a guest, especially if you're a contractor or a public adjuster or whatever. And go ahead and send me messages, tell me what you want me to see in the future, complain about how crappy my videos are. It's all good. We'll see you later, and just leave you with this: the truth always drips out.